So welcome to this, this Sustainability Day for staff, or half day as we have used to make it. I just heard the comment that this is a small room, so I'm quite glad for that comment. It means that we might be even more people in the room that was kind of registered for it. So I hope you don't mind, but if you feel unsafe, there's some places in the front. But good to see you all here. And as previous Sustainability Days, most of the time this afternoon will be used for workshops on various urgent themes. And this day we have 4 ones on games, on climate and sustainable consumption, led by Erik Sterner. Accounting for environmental liabilities by Mari Pananen. Sustainable cities and communities, that will be led by Maria José Zapata Campos, Sarah Broström and Herman Ståhl. We will also have a theme on innovating a sustainable blue economy, led by Lena Gippert and Maureen McKelvey. And many thanks for those of you or who are organizing and coordinating these themes. That will be surely very interesting and fruitful, I'm sure. And these are planned to start at 14:15. But the first hour, we will focus on the challenge of climate change. And I'm very glad to introduce our colleague from the Faculty of Natural Sciences at the University of Gothenburg, Professor Deliang Chen. As I believe you all know, this issue of climate change is extremely timely. And of course, in the wake of COP26 that finalized on Saturday, but also since the Vice Chancellor of the University of Gothenburg recently decided on the implementation of a climate framework, how we can contribute to kind of diminish the emissions of CO2. So that means that when I have set the limits that we, until the end of 2023, should cut our CO2 emissions by 25%, and by the end of by 2030, we should have cut them by 50%. These are challenging tasks, and I trust that we will be stimulated and motivated and engaged how to do it by Deliang's presentation today. And added to these 2 things, then, of course, it's the recent launch of the IPCC report, of which Deliang Chen is one of the coordinating lead authors. And that means that he has had overarching responsibility for a chapter of the report and led a good number of researchers in kind of assessing the knowledge. Deliang is a professor in physical meteorology at the University of Gothenburg. And over the years, he has developed crucial knowledge about climate change, both in Sweden and abroad. And he was recently awarded the 8th size King's Medal of the Order of the Seraphim for his climate research. And he is also on Reuters' hot list as one of the world's foremost climate scientists. I have to read this by paper, I don't really make it. But so this is really an honor for us to have Deliang here. And I would say before Deliang starts that Deliang's presentation will be recorded, as will be the questions afterwards, and published, so it could be used in education and among alumnus, etc. So that could be good for all of you to know. But that's enough here. Please, Deliang, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marie, for the nice introduction. I'm extremely happy to be here to see the old friends, Thomas, Nela, and Marie, and many others, and also some new faces. And as you can see, the topic today is quite big. It's too big. And but basically, I will try to focus on the IPCC report. Basically, this is a scientific understanding and natural science, based on natural science we have. And then I will briefly mention something about the science and something about society, because these are a little bit beyond what IPCC Working Group 1 has been doing. As you probably also know that IPCC has 3 working groups. So I'm going to talk only about Working Group 1, which is natural science. And also, as a principle, IPCC is not supposed to talk about society. So we were given the mandate to be policy or society relevant, but not policy prescriptive. meaning that we should not talk about anything about the implications, the policy, etc. So I'm very careful. If you see a slide like this one, you know this is what IPCC. So I have two hats here. One is as an IPCC person. And the second hat is as a professor at this university, which means I'm a little bit free to say what I think is important. But then it has to be clear that what I'm saying without IPCC logo is my personal view. It should not be taken as the view of IPCC. And so climate change, probably, as Marie said, is most actually important challenge humanity is facing, because many of the, when we talk about sustainability, as you know, environment is one of the pillars, and climate, of course, is probably the most important thing for many, many environmental issues. And we recently, I'm also quite active in the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, not the Academy, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and where we try to summarize what we know about climate change from a natural science perspective. So if you are reading Swedish, I'm taking a picture from that report, and which is can be easily found at the internet in Swedish, actually. 15 pages, very short but very good summary. I would say it took us more than 1 year to develop this Swedish text, especially for me, because as you know, I'm not native Swedish, but I took this as a challenge to practice my Swedish. So in the end, actually, it's not bad. I mean, I have heard. Also, of course, we got a lot of help. So what you see here, basically, is that we have a quite complicated system, climate system, when we talk about the change of the system. So you have all the components shown here. But in the central part is that human has started to change that system. We have a concept called Anthropocene, which was invented by Paul Crutzen, who was my supervisor, PhD supervisor, many years ago. And he died this year. But he is great he got the Nobel Prize actually in chemistry. But actually, I think he should get another Nobel Prize for the development of the concept of Anthropocene, because this is really what we are seeing, that human society as a force of the climate system. And actually, this time, IPCC for the first time in the chapter 1 I'm leading, and we actually wrote a history about climate science, which is fantastic, and I could talk hours about the whole history, but I just want to mention one of the events and then put IPCC into a kind of context. And I hope this is the pointer. Yes. So this year, just a couple of weeks ago, I hope you have read the news that we have given this year's physics prize, Nobel Prize, to climate researchers. Actually 3, even the third one is also had done something in climate science. And if you happen to listen to my introduction in the Swedish TV, when we announced this prize, and then you know even the third one has also been a climate researcher in some sense. But anyway, these two gentlemen here, for their work in the 60s actually. And one of them developed the first climate model, and Manabe from Japan, the second one from Germany, Klaus Hasselmann. And he developed a model which combines the climate with stochastic weather. And so we can detect the human fingerprint on climate system. So because of their contribution, I will say that we started the discussion about if the climate change has been human-made or it is purely natural. I would say even 1 year ago, that was still the debate. Not much in Sweden, but in the United States, as you know, even today, about 50% people don't believe in that. And then you might be asked why. And as you can see, the IPCC actually started in '88, so it's quite late in that part of the history. So actually the whole climate science has been going on. The theory about the greenhouse effect has been developed more than 100 years ago. We have also one Swede here, Svan Arrhenius. And he also got the Nobel Prize in chemistry, not for climate science, but he was the first one who estimated something called climate sensitivity, meaning that if you double the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, how many degrees of global warming you will have, and how sensitive the system is to the perturbation of the carbon dioxide. And he was the first guy who did that calculation more than 100 years ago. And his conclusion was about 6 degrees Celsius. And this guy from Japan and from US, like he's a US citizen now, but he was originally from Japan, Manabe, he estimated in the 60s, this number is around 2.1 degrees. At this time, IPCC is one of the most important results of the IPCC report. We said the best estimate is around 3. So you can see the science has been developing actually. So that's why he's fantastic in having a very simple model. Even Swan Arrhenius more than 100 years ago, they did a quite good estimation. As you know, many people are interested in climate change, and I'm still receiving, like Thomas, every day 10 emails from different people arguing about this number, and mainly from engineers who is good in calculation. And I still have one that is send me like 5 emails every day. But at least you can see the interest. And now this is not from IPCC, of course. We cannot talk about any politics. And if this is politics, or is something else, science is not, I'm sure, because it's we have science which says something else. But you can see that the climate change issue has been such a big issue. So even the most economically powerful country or nation has been concerned with that, has their own series. And we have to remember it was not so long ago that US is back to the Paris Agreement. It's less than 1 year ago. And this slide shows you that on the political agenda or on the international negotiation side, what was the development. And some of you maybe know that after IPCC, then we have a Kyoto Protocol. It was signed in Japan in 1997. And you can see also from this short story, you can see that how important it is to have a consistent political will to debate, discuss the issue. And so hopefully this time we'll see a more stable political atmosphere, I hope. And it is under this background, or against that background, that the IPCC report I'm going to talk about has been released in August this year. And so basically after the Paris Agreement, and after as I said, that just about 1 year ago, that the US is back to the deal. And we still have a lot of challenges. And Marie said that I should mention something about COP in the end, which we will discuss. As you probably also know that there are still challenges in the COP negotiation results. I want to make a point before I talk about the main outcomes of the IPCC report. That is, now scientists are much involved in this because it's no way to avoid. I personally, like 10 years ago, I tried always staying within natural science, even don't think about the implications because I know it is complicated. It is also very dangerous sometimes. I remember the first time I made a big statement about IPCC report, I got my garden destroyed, even here in Sweden. At this time, I got this still things happening in my garden and my window and so on. So it's a lot of course, emotions in the world. And it was also a survey in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, which says that in Sweden, 40% of people don't believe that climate change is induced by human activities. I'm not expert in that, but I have seen that the methodology of that survey has some problem, because also personally, I don't trust such a high number in Sweden, because I know that not long ago we had a similar survey which says like 10% in Sweden. That's probably is correct, but 40% is too much to me. You are expert, probably better than me. But anyway, scientists who are involved in this debate do you think we are neutral? Because we're supposed to be neutral, of course. And so this is a big question, actually. And my answer after so many years work with IPCC and also with all the different, from different perspectives, I would say, no, we are not neutral. We still have scientists who don't agree with each other, who have different ways to communicate, and also sometimes even have different understanding of the same report, like IPCC report. And you have the reasons here. I hope I can convince you that even scientists, individual scientists, are not very good. That's why politicians often say that, well, it's not so that we don't trust science, but if we ask 3 scientists about the same issue, quite often I got 3 different answers, which is to some extent true, because depending on your perspective, your discipline, and also we are humans. We all have our own beliefs, emotions, ideological maybe background, cultural background, etc. So this is indeed, I think, why IPCC is so great. Because then you can use a collective wisdom. You have a process that is transparent, that is objective, to the extent possible. I would say always, something there. But I think that is added value. That is basically why we need a body like IPCC, and also why we also have some political dimensions in the IPCC process, because IPCC process in terms of reviews, now we are doing research, we know the importance of reviews, peer reviews, etc. So IPCC basically has 3 reviews. Number 1 is that all the work used by IPCC has to be reviewed as a scientific paper in your discipline. Secondly, there is also an expert review that when we have the draft ready, then we send to the world, we invite people. Everybody can be a reviewer, actually, if you have some expertise. So it's a really open process. And you just need to register yourself. Then you can review. You can have comments. Then we have to answer all the comments by writing, each of them. And we will publish all our responses to the comments on the website. So that is the process. You cannot imagine that a university or even a country like US can manage. It's a quite complicated process. But I think it's useful. And lastly, we have something called a governmental review. That is, we invite all the governments to review the process reports also. Indeed, in the last 2 weeks, we have a sitting we call the approval session. The naming is not really good. It sounds like the governments are approving the science, which is not true, because they cannot say anything about science, but they can ask questions. They can ask for evidences of our conclusions. They can ask for clarifications of methodology, etc. And not least, they can ask for wording, because as you know, that same word can be understood in different ways. So we have to really explain to them why we choose this word and that word and so on. For which IPCC has been criticized, being political, which I think is nonsense, because the purpose of IPCC reports is to give the knowledge to the society, especially the policymakers. And they have to sign on, they have to understand. Otherwise, they will not take actions, like the COP meeting we are going to discuss a little bit more. If the countries have not been in the process, they can, in COP meeting, challenge the IPCC report. Say, okay, this is not correct, we don't trust that evidence. But now instead of criticize the IPCC report or conclusions of that, they have to focus on the negotiations. So that is the power. That is the buy-in of the government, and because of the purpose, because of the mandate of the IPCC. So in the end, especially, we have a short report called Summary for Policymakers, around 40 pages, which is, you can see this is both scientific and a political document. So a little numbers to give you idea why this process is so great. Like this time we got all together, for example, almost 80 formal comments, 80,000, not 80. And of course, these are the comments that is from offsite. We also review each other. We have something like our guests, like 30,000 internal comments. So we have to address within the group. And all these 78 review comments has to be answered in writing. We have to have discussion for each of them, and we write, we debate, we put together. It takes a long time, as you can imagine. If you publish a paper and you have 100 comments, it will be like headache. But this is number we have. And also, this is not the first time we do it. It's the sixth time. So the big question, a very good question, is that what is the main difference this time compared to the past? So I have here a summary very quickly, so you have a quick idea if you have read the report or heard something about past report, the fifth report basically. Ours also a need also for the fifth report. And so I have been personally engaged in IPCC process for the last 20 years in different capacities. I was even in the capacity as an observer in the governing council of IPCC because I used to be the head of International Council for Sciences based in Paris. And the International Science Council in Paris has a seat in the UN system. So I have a seat in the UN system, and we can be observers in different discussions. And so from that perspective, I can see a lot of interesting and also power of the IPCC process. So very quickly about what is new this time. I think the context is clear, as I said in the very beginning. And what is new this time is that we have made a lot of progress in terms of science. And not least because we have better observation. Now we have, since last report, we have like 6 years, 7 years more observation. And also observation system has been developed. As you know, the climate model plays a very important role in the climate science. The model has been also much better. The resolution, the process that is included, and also we also emphasize much more on something called multiple line of evidence. And previously, much of the evidence are mainly based on modeling. Now we have emphasized a lot on observation from different sources of information, etc. And so all this has led to the improved understanding of the climate system, and not least to the conclusion that is very important. As you probably remember, the last time we said that global warming is most likely caused by human activities, meaning we have 99% confidence. This time we said it is a fact, meaning 100%. And so I think that is a very, very strong signal to the policy community. So no debate anymore. Whatever, whoever is going to say the reason, but the science is clear. We are 100% sure it is caused by human activity. And also this time, before we started, I talked to Marie about what this report will influence the second working group and third one even. And this time we have a lot more collaboration among the working groups. And we tried very much to already talk to working group 3 people already in the beginning this time, because the socio-economic scenario is the driver of climate change. And we have to make sure the socio-economic path or development that we are using makes sense. And also we have to make sure that we deliver the information they need in order to carry out their works. One of this aspect is something called risk framing, which is also very interesting in the climate change communication. Even in Sweden, I have been quite often asked by people that we have heard a lot about tipping points. We have heard also the system is on the way to be collapsed very soon. We have heard that probably humanity will disappear. And well, I would say if you look at IPCC outcome, projection for future, this is very unlikely, this kind of end of the world scenario. But IPCC at this time, we are deal with this. Because in the past, IPCC always said, we don't have enough evidence, so we don't say anything. But this time said, okay, even we don't have enough evidence, which we call it deep uncertainty. So there are things we simply don't know. But we try our best to do a risk assessment. So IPCC this time has been putting all these kind of worst case scenarios into a risk framing. And we try to do this with working group 2 and 3 together. That is the first time. And so if you are interested, you can read that. The outcome of this is that we basically, with this concept, we can talk about tipping points. First time. But still, we don't think it's going to happen within the next decades. What we think is that we cannot, at the moment, we cannot exclude the possibility of this kind of extreme events happens. For example, in Europe, you probably have heard that the Gulf Stream has been declining, and many people feel it can collapse. If it collapses, it would mean 10-degree temperature drop for us, which will basically come back to the ice age for this part of the world, which is, of course, a very serious issue. If you watch the movie that called it The Day After Tomorrow, and you remember that scenario. And this time we said that we cannot exclude the possibility. So this is quite interesting. And again, that is not easy to communicate. Personally, I have been struggling to communicate that in a risk framing, but my colleagues, some of my colleagues have been quite simplifying the whole story, just say that is going to happen, and which I think is not good in my view. So we have some debate. If you are reading Dagens Nyheter, we have some debate. I personally have been engaged in that debate. And because if you believe that scenario is going to happen, then you might say, why we should reduce the emission? Or we have to be hurry, panic. And this is also what I'm trying to say. Panic does not help. We have to sit down, look at the science. We have to carefully plan what we can do. And not only just climate, of course, but also, now I have to say something about COP. For example, many people are disappointed with the Indians' initiative to change the wording in the last minute, which I said also in the media interview, I can understand them to some extent. Why is that? It's because look at the situation in India. Look at the history. I will talk about this later on. You cannot think that India should, like what we probably trying to do, to shut down everything immediately, which would not be working with such a huge population, with such a weak infrastructure and so on. You probably will cause another big issues, and which will destroy actually in the end maybe your implementation of your climate policy. But of course, this is a very complicated issue, and many people argue that people need a panic to find solutions. I'm not expecting that, but I always say that if I'm driving on the highway, if I know I missed the exit, what I do? Should I just brake, take the brake, stop? I think probably you will slow down and then think about and carefully, to be careful not to miss the next exit. Maybe that's my take on the whole thing. But of course, this is a whole science in how society should be reacting to the crisis, and I'm not expecting that. So now I'm stepping out of the IPCC domain. Sorry for that. But I think this risk framing is very important. It also has been useful this time. We have been successful in developing that, what we call no probability but high impact events. So short named LLHI, which is something new. We also developed a whole set of new methods, which I not have time to explain to you, but trust me, it's a lot of quite useful methods, not least this Nobel Prize winners method to detect and attribute human activity, the climate change to human activity. So it's a fingerprint method has been developed. So much so we can do actually this time to so-called weather events. In the past, we can only do this for the global temperature increase. We cannot do individual events, weather. As you know, weather is very noisy. So it's very hard to say if this year, winter, 2 days has been very cold. Can you say something about the coupling to the human activities? It was impossible. But now we can do this, actually. Like the forest fire we have been seeing around the world. All these are individual events, weather events, basically hot and dry, typically. Now we can with new method to say something about the linkages between this event and the human activities, which is great. And also, we have a new set of the scenarios. Basically, scenario is something for working group 3, because we need to know the socio-economic development in order to estimate, for example, the emissions. So now we have 5 new scenarios, which covers a lot of different, a wide range of different possibilities. And I will show you, hopefully I have a diagram showing that. And finally, we also have a much more regional emphasis this time. We talk about global warming, global climate change, but nobody lives on the globe. We are living always somewhere in some time. So you need, in order to look at the impacts, we have to really go to the region, to the time period, etc. So we have done a lot of that. And in the past, the IPCC information is not easy to access because it's terabyte size of file, special format. You cannot easily access and process. But this time we developed a tool called Digital Atlas. Everybody can easily make very beautiful plot like IPCC in seconds, basically. So you just go to the website, then you choose your variable, your region, your time, etc., your model, your preferred model, then you get the plot. You get information, or you get digital data, which is fantastic, I would say. And especially for people like Thomas doing a lot of things in the developing countries. And this is something I have been dreaming of, that we could have such a tool to deliver the information we have. And that's basically, it's my summary of what is new this time. And so now I just show you some of the main results of this assessment. So what I want to show you here is that we are not doing research with IPCC report. We are doing assessment, meaning we connect all the published work together. And we, as I showed in the beginning, one slide showed that this time we used a lot of literatures. We assess them. And then what I mean by assessment is that we look at in several steps, and we look at, for example, that what is happening, what is existing, then we look at what's happening, we evaluate the reliability, and also we put confidence into the assessment we have. And we basically put reliability, the confidence, the probability attached to each of the statements we are making. Like the human activity influence the climate warming, we say now it's a fact, and it's 100%. So otherwise, we have something called a calibrated language, which is great. And I personally have learned so much from IPCC through this process, because I really understand, okay, what we as researchers usually say. We are not sure actually people understand in the same way as we say. So we have to really calibrate. And IPCC has a really good calibrated language about probability and confidence and so on. So now to the results. And that is not new, I would say, but it just confirms what we know. Basically, we have seen a lot of changes. And we have seen some of the changes are intensifying. That's important. So accelerating is becoming faster. And also some of the climate changes we have today is new, is unprecedented, is something we never saw in the last at least thousands of years, in some cases a few millions of years. So just to show you a few examples here. And this is carbon dioxide, because this is the main greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas, you can see that this is about last 1 million years. So you have a level around 250 or so. But then over the last decades, you can see a dramatic change. And this is seen here since 1850. And today we are above 400 ppm. And we have the scenario, 5 scenarios here. You can see that we have a much higher values in the future. Same with other variables, because we're talking about Earth system science here. And I had a lot of discussion with Nena here about Earth system science, because we can really have all the components here. You have ocean, you have atmosphere, you have biosphere, and so on. So all these are one system. So if you look at some of the indicators for all of them, you can see all of them has been changing. And over the last decades, the changes are intensifying. And this is a nice way with color bars actually to show this. COP meeting has a lot of these images, which is developed actually by one of my colleagues in my chapter, and Ed Hawkins in the UK, and he is a very smart guy. So a few more things that is maybe more of concern to us. We also look at the region, but if we just look at the region here, is Northern Europe, where we are. You can see this is hot extremes, and the dots here basically shows the confidence. So 3 dots is very confident, the highest level. So you can see that between 50s or since the 50s, 1950s, we have seen an increase of the hot extremes in summer, basically. That I think everybody here has experienced that. We have, over the last years, we have a lot of hot summer days. But more seriously is that the extreme heavy precipitation. This year has been a very good example in Sweden, actually. We started to see the heavy precipitation in Europe. In Asia and in other parts of the world, US, it happens every year. But here in Europe, it's really, really rare events, extreme events. And also, this time we did an assessment of what we said 20 years ago about climate change, how reliable they are, the predictions, basically. So here the black curves are the observation. All different lines are different so-called projections or climate change scenarios we made 20 years ago or so. As you can see that all the scenarios are pretty good, which is, of course, in science, we like to do the verification. This is really a strong verification of the science. And one of the very important achievement this time is that we have been succeeded in narrow down the range of the climate sensitivity. As I told you before, this is the key number, basically, to show how the climate will be changed if you change the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So as you can see, we already have something in the 80s, and then there's 5 IPCC reports, the last one here, and this one here. So this is the first time we have been able to narrow down the uncertainty. It is quite a complicated system, so you have an uncertainty, meaning it could be here or it could be as high as here. But the range has been decreased, which is great. At the same time, you can see the mean or the best estimated value has been slightly higher than before, which also means the climate risk, change of risk, is slightly higher than before. So this is really the most important message, that through attribution studies, we know that, for example, the climate change over the last decades, the warming, especially here, is impossible without human activities. So here is the simulations with only natural factors. Here are the simulations with natural plus the anthropogenic factor. The black lines here are the observations. You can see that this is a proof that without human activities, we should not see the warming over the last decades, at least. So this is a scenario, and 5 scenarios we created. As you can see, this is the best scenario that is heavily discussed in COP meeting. So this is the one we are aiming at, because this is the only one we can manage the 1.5 degree. All others are impossible. But what does that mean if you look at this yourself? So it started in 2005 or 15. So basically we are here, meaning that we have to cut emission by 6-7% every year over the next decade, basically. And then we have to reach zero, so-called carbon neutral, around 2060, which is very ambitious. And anybody here have the idea how much reduction we have seen during the COVID, 2020? It was exactly 7%. So meaning we have to have the COVID shock in the next 10 years or even more, which is challenging, as you can imagine. So you can tell us a little bit about the difficulty. And of course, the worst case scenario at the moment, it seems like it's good, it's gone. Although we met scenario, but it looks like we are not going to get there. That is good news. And after COP meeting, now we actually already started commenting on COP. After this COP meeting, recently, just two days ago, people made a quick estimate. It looks like we are approaching this scenario. So in the middle. This scenario means that at the end of this century, we'll be having a temperature about 2.4 degrees. Still above the Paris Agreement, even 2 degrees. And the second one, this one, means that we can reach the 2 degrees. It will be above 1.5. And so we still probably need to, hopefully in the next couple of years, to have higher ambition, to have a more commitment from countries to come down to this scenario. So that is hope. That's why people are divided. I can see that some people are happy with the COP meeting because at least we have taken up the fossil fuel as an issue. That's the first time in history. Can you imagine? After many years, we don't even dare to take the name of the fossil fuel. So this time we have the fossil fuel on the document. It's the first time. Secondly, even India said that they will try to get the carbon neutral 2070. A bit late, maybe, but still the first time they have promised something. So on that aspect, it might be a good news. So finally, I want to show you why this is important and to discuss the different countries. This is, I think, the most important result of the IPCC assessment. Namely, we find a very simple relationship between something called a cumulative carbon dioxide emission and the global warming. So the black lines here, again, observations. So if you plot the cumulative, so basically all the emissions in the history together, and then continue integrating, then you can see the global warming is quite linear to that. That is amazing, simple relationship, meaning if you know how much emission you will add to the atmosphere, then you know how much warming you'll get. That is fantastic because otherwise the climate model is very intensive and also takes a lot of time to compute. But this, everybody can do the simple estimate. So you can put the future here also. You can see that the 5 scenarios here. So with, for example, this best case scenario, you can see here that, so in the end, we'll be ending up with something like 1.5 degrees. But I hope I have a better diagram to show this. I have a lot of slides to show, but I think I skipped all of them. I'll show you this one. So that means that actually the climate, the emission is not happening today. We are focusing too much on what's happening today. It is cumulative. So it started from the industrialization, of course. You can see that. So what we have is that we already, if we want to reach 1.5 degree goal, so we have something like here. That is the maximum cumulative carbon we could have. But we already used all this. So we have less than 20% left. So that's why I said I understand India. Because India has not started so much. All this has been caused by us and partly by China in the recent decades. But India has not had the chance to do this yet. And also even that less than 20%, we are still emitting. Even the big nations like Australia is not committing so strongly. to the reduction. And more importantly, we already see a lot of damage that has been caused by this 1.2. Today is already 1.2 degree. So if we are talking about 1.5 degree goal, we already used 1.2. So it's only 0.3 left. And it already caused a lot of damage. Some estimates say it's something like 3 times of the money that has been promised by developed countries per year. That is 100 billion US dollar per year, as you said. So even this time, I was disappointed. We still have not done anything with that. It is a promise that was made 10 years ago. And even this year, we cannot reach anything. Even in Swedish media, this point is taken as the last point. To me, we have to put this point in the beginning. And of course, this is not IPCC. Again, this is my personal view. So with that, I think I stop because I still have many slides to show, but it's in the interest of time, I stop here. And thank you very much for your attention. And I'm ready for any questions or debates. Thank you.
So great thanks this far, Deliang, for taking us into the quite complicated issues that IPCC in the first report deals with. So now we get some sense of it, become a bit wiser. Many thanks. There will be some time for questions. I have asked our own in-house excellence in IPCC, Thomas Sterner, to start the questioning, but also with some comments on the COP26. I guess we all would like to hear what Thomas says about that. So please, Thomas.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Deliang, for such a thoughtful and nuanced discussion of not just of climate change, but of the relationship between climate change and the scientific process. I think that's very good and very useful for us. The reactions range from deep disappointment to some very positive reactions, and I think I will shortcut. You managed to say all the points I was going to say. We seem to agree a lot. I would also start with India. Maybe I would start by saying that, I mean, it is, of course, depressing. This is the most depressing thing is just the number, COP26. We have been talking about this for so long, and now suddenly we have a fight about whether we can mention fossil fuels in the or not. I mean, but this shows what strong opposition we are facing. If you take an old issue of the Fortune magazine, they used to have the Fortune 500, all the biggest companies in the world 20 years ago, they were all oil and coal companies and 1 or 2 car companies. And now that's no longer true. Health providers and insurance companies and other things have taken their place, and the coal companies and even the oil companies are falling gradually. But India is given very unfair sort of press in many countries. I don't belong to Modi's supporters in any way, but I think the Indian standpoint is very clear. They have 1/10 of the emissions per capita to the United States. And this was the same debate already in Copenhagen 12 years ago. That time, Europe said we would reduce by 30%, and the US wanted to reduce by 5 or 10%. And then everybody looked at India, and they said, well, we actually want to increase our emissions because we're just doing what you did, and our emissions will always be much lower than yours. And you promised all this money. And the money, we should say, is not just charity. It is money we, in a sense, owe, because if this had been a public good, and it is. The atmosphere belongs, in some sense, you can say, to everybody. And we had a global deal to share it. Then India would have got a share in proportion to its size in population. If we had a global cap and trade with per capita allocation, then India would have the same price as we. So they would use good technologies. They would phase out coal quickly. And they would have a lot of permits that they would sell to the US and others, and they would make $100 billion a year. And that's basically the money they want. And I think it's quite reasonable that they ask for that, even to the point of playing chicken with the planet, because the US is also playing chicken with the planet. So I want to get to questions, and I'd like to ask, there were some other progresses, something like the methane deal. There was, China said they would stop financing coal plants abroad. The ADB, the Asian Development Bank, have put up 8 billion for actually retiring coal plants, buying them and closing them down. Europe has also a deal with South Africa like this for retiring coal plants. So those were the kind of things I thought were encouraging. What did you think was the most important, promising? So that's one question. My other question is, I would love to hear more about the fingerprint method. I'm wondering how you can understand. Maybe that's the best question for you to explain. It's natural science. Yeah. How can you say this storm is tied to climate change? I'd like to understand that.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, thank you. I start with this one, the natural science question. And so as you know, the weather is quite noisy, and it's meaning that it's kind of random. But with today's climate model, we can simulate not only climate, but also weather, by actually slightly change the initial conditions. So the weather is now also influenced by initial conditions, slightly, very small, and with something we call the external forcing, which is greenhouse gases. So now we can run the model many, many times with slight initial conditions, with different emissions. Then we look at basically the noisy data. We try to find a pattern. We basically find the probability. Okay, you have one meaning simulations, then maybe 80% of them show a pattern, which is only when you have the greenhouse gases. So that is a very simple answer. So because of the computer, because of the model, also because of the fingerprint technology. And fingerprint meaning that there are special signals which, if it is caused by humans. And that is quite easy to be understood. For example, if we have the greenhouse gas, we know that in winter, it should have more effect than in summer. Because in winter, the same forcing will be more important. Because in summer, the solar radiation is very important. The same thing applies to day and light. During the night, the greenhouse effect should be more visible than during the day. So all these are fingerprints. If you put them into a mathematical form, then you can basically find more linkages between the cause and effect. So the second question, I agree with you, and there are some positive things. And actually, for example, the agreement between China and the US I would take as one of the most important things. Because as you know, US has been number one for a long time. And China now take up as number one for a few years now. So these two countries takes up a large percentage. I don't remember exact number. I think it's 60% or so of the global. So if the two can do something about climate change, I'm sure that we can solve a big part of the problem. And also, more importantly, as I tried to indicate in my first slide, that there was a political conflict to blame each other over a long period of time, which will not be helpful at all. So with this agreement, I hope there will be some more real collaborations. I think there will be, if Biden is still in the administration, which we don't know. There is a big uncertainty. But if that happens, that would be a good news for the world, I think. And messing is another one. I think is real. The messing, because the CH4 messing is one of the most important long-term greenhouse, non-traditional greenhouse gas, if you want, just after carbon dioxide. And this time we have some concrete agreement there, which I think is very good. And also with that, actually, I should mention there's another report this time, because basically the IPCC report is good, but it takes some time to deliver. So we do another assessment every year. This is called the 10 new insights about climate science. Every year we do this. And this year we look at a whole range of issues we published this report. We launched that report in COP, actually. I hope that the report has some impact because we mentioned the messaging. And also we mentioned that one of the issues about this, actually, how to actually have a just and fair way to deal with the challenges. And Thomas is heavily involved in that one, I think. I was involved in another one. So this report, I think, is it's a good one.
Thank you very much. We have time for some more questions. I would say that we plan for another seminar IPCC when the 2 next reports will come next spring. They come in February and March, as I understand. And then they will deal more with kind of our disciplinary issues. So we'll have another one by then. If you think Thomas got too small time now, too short. But please, questions to Deliang. And I will pass you the microphone. Comment, Lena.
First, thank you very much for this presentation and also helping us to also choose the wordings. I think many of us here are also confronting our students, and you mentioned the movie. What was it called?
The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, The Day After Tomorrow. I think I showed it for students when it came, and it was like, should we really, and they should be frightened, and how much should we say? It was all this discussion. And so I was more interested, how do you, the message to your students, how severe, how much do you like scare them, and what do you tell to your children? How should we like talk about this, or how do you talk about this? I think that could help us also as teachers.
Yeah. So what I would like to tell them is that this is a risk, meaning that there's a quite small risk in terms of the probability, but a big one in terms of impact. And I also usually compare this with taking an airplane to travel, because we know that some airplane will crash, but the probability is very small. And then what we do is that we need to recognize there is such a risk, but we should not be scared. And also we should not, for example, we should not say, okay, then I will not travel anymore with airplane. That's not the way. So you have to compare this with other things you are doing, and also with other risks. In terms of climate change risk, this is one actually quite concrete risk, I would say, for us here at least. But also we have to think about there are already other risks that is already happening. We see climate refugees already. Sea level, for example, rise is the one that is for sure it will be happening, has been happening. So we'll see more and more refugees in the future. And so if you put all this together, we also have other risks in the world. Besides climate change, we have the war. And just look at Afghanistan. After so many years nation building, I'm worried that we will have other humanitarian catastrophes that is not far away. So if you put all this together, then you should know what you are supposed to do, think. That would be my personal way, to think about all this together and take it as a risk. And also think about what I can do. I think climate change is something everybody can contribute. And quite often we hear the comments that Sweden is so small. What we do is 0.some% in terms of the global emission. Then we should not do anything. But it's a public comments, as Thomas said. And we actually also, we can just sacrifice a little bit of our living standard, maybe our consumption. Because when we criticize India, China, for example, for emissions, we have to realize actually they are producing a lot of things for us. The consumption is driven not only by their domestic people, actually mainly by, especially for India, I would say, by the people outside India. So if we can couple this to our personal behavior, in this report we said, of course, you need 3 level things. You need a structure, you need an industry, you also need a personal level. So I think we can all contribute to the personal level thing, and then probably we can also influence the structure probably through our research, through our engagement with policymakers, etc. And so if you're doing that, if you're doing your best, then I usually say, then I will be relaxed. If I have done my best, then things can happen still, but then I'm happy. I'm not kind of scared.
Time is running. If there are no other burning questions, I guess we say so many thanks for this. I mean, yeah, if we do our best, we can be relaxed. That's somehow comforting. And also this, that, well, we're not just having the climate challenge, we have all the other, counting the SDGs for no hunger, no poverty, biodiversity. Yeah.
It's more serious than climate, actually.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to take the debate now. But so we certainly have, so we have to look at the holistic picture. I fully agree with you, though it might not be fully comforting to say that if we save the climate, we still have 16 other SDGs to count for. So, but thank you very much. I think this final word of yours of, I mean, if we could do our best, there is personal issues we could do, and still also, and I think that is for the students of and the research from this school, look at the structure and the industry. Certainly a lot of tasks there to do in education and research. So thank you very much. This has been great. And I have a little gift, which is not about, well, everything is about climate, everything is about society, but this is about art at the business school.
Oh.
So if you don't want to think about IPCC for a little while, you can look at the compilation of our nice art at the school here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much.